So the question, I had to ask myself, what does God want done in the evolution of life? And it came to me, I don't think God wants people to be poor. And today in the world, America especially, is this gap between the rich and everybody else. And I know the game of the rich. My rich dad taught me, you know it because you're the banker. The game the bankers and the rich play is different than what they teach you in school. And that's the story of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. My poor dad, PhD, stands for poor, helpless, and desperate. They don't know anything about money. And they're teaching our kids. And my rich dad was an entrepreneur who never finished school. I grew up in Hawaii. So all of the pieces of the puzzle, when Fuller scolded me back in '83, the pieces of the puzzle and my life started to come together. And I understood what he was saying then. He says, well, maybe we should stop ripping people off. It might be a good thing. And, the question I ask all over the world, what does school teach you about money? And the answer is nothing. And that's not a mistake. That's not an accident. I knew that. Most people know that. But the way to keep the poor and middle class working hard is never teach them what the rich know. So if you read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which came out in 1997, it's what the rich teach their kids about money, the poor and middle class do not. And I had already retired. I made enough money at 47, so I didn't have to work again for the rest of my life. And I said, now what do I do with the rest of my life? And so that's when I came out with Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the cash flow game, because poverty hurts. I don't like it. And I don't like that our academic system's so corrupt. We know the banking system's corrupt. We know politics is corrupt. But academics is just as corrupt. So I just said, well, if exactly as Fuller said, what does God want done, not what I want done. Martin Luther King said it another way. King says, I just want to do God's will. So that's what I cover in faith. What does God want done?
You're giving me weird flashbacks here, Robert, because for 20 years of my life, I was in banking, trying to do what was good for Brian.
Right.
But honestly, the last 8 years has been London Real, and this is definitely what God wants done.
Yeah.
And it's a complete,
education.
Yeah.
But you'll never get this on CNBC.
Right, because it doesn't play in with the whole structure that you talk about with Wall Street. Right? And the fact that it's corrupted our academic institution, that kind of makes you mad, doesn't it? One thing if it's the banking and the politics, but this is where we send our children, and we trust them to do the right things for them, and yet they're being not taught something so fundamental. Like you asked your dad when you were a kid, Dad, you asked your teacher, when are you going to teach us about money? And it was just
never.
Never.
And they never will. First of all, let's go back to what is financial education. It's not get a job, work hard, save money, and invest in a well-diversified portfolio of stocks, bonds, mutual funds, and ETFs. That's not it. Money is, the financial industry is two things, debt and taxes. Debt and taxes, and that's where things starts. 1971, Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard, and the US dollar became debt. And we still tell kids to go to school, get a job, work hard, save money, and get out of debt. Now, who tells them to do that? That's the most ridiculous thing there is.
The book starts and it says, lie number 1, saving money will make you rich.
Yeah, it never will. You know that.
We're all taught that as kids.
Yeah, because they can print it. Why would you save it and why would you work for it if they can print it faster than you can work for it? And number 2 is they keep dropping the interest rates on it. Japan still has zero interest rate policy. And the Japanese are the biggest savers in the world. And I'm Japanese, I'm 4th generation. They're not too bright.
Right.
Why do you keep saving when they're printing it? When I'm in Japan, that's what I mean by fear. They're so afraid because the Japanese, they're very good culture, but they do as they're told.
It's very conformist.
Very conformist, very conformist. So they just do as they're told, and then they just save money, and their government, this guy Abenomics, is just printing trillions of it, and buying ETFs with it, and they don't know what to do.
And they've been doing this for 20
because
years.
they're afraid.
They're afraid. Okay.
They're afraid they might make a mistake. They're good little students in school. Go to school, get a job, don't make mistakes.
Right. And that's what school conditions people to do,
Correct.
is to not get mistakes.
Correct.
Get an A on the test, show up and do your homework. But to be a great entrepreneur and investor and a great rich person, you have to engineer mistakes into your life.
Well, I write about it in Fake, I mean, the way I learned to be I flew for them, I stopped sailing for Standard Oil of California as a third mate for them. And I went to fly for the US Marine Corps in Vietnam. And the military education is different than academic education. We're taught to make mistakes. So every day I'd fly and we had to kill the engine on our aircraft and crash.
It's called auto rotation. I used to fly R-22s, and it's the scariest thing you've ever done.
But every aircraft we did, I was cross-trained in all the aircraft. We always practice crashing. Because one day, as you know, you will crash.
And you did crash.
And I did crash 3 times. But if I didn't practice that, I'd be dead. So what happens to the average person in a financial crash, they don't know what to do. And right now, as you know, for the middle class of the world, we're in a crash. The purchasing power of the yen, the euro, the rupiah, all going down. What I do isn't risky for me, but it's risky for you. And when somebody says, what is risk? You have to look in the mirror. Do you know what I mean? For me to fly in Vietnam, that was high risk. But the higher the risk, the more you have to study. You know that, I know that. So if you're not going to study, you're not going to practice and all that, then you should do what Wall Street tells you to do. Buy, 401ks, mutual funds, ETFs and all that. But that's where they're fake assets, because they only make Wall Street or the City of London rich. Just watch where the cash is flowing. Follow the money.
Yeah.
It's not making the poor middle class rich. All Wall Street in America has done is rip off the pensions, because pensions are the biggest pool of money in America. And states like Kentucky, New Jersey, Illinois, California, Hawaii are going bankrupt because Wall Street went in and just sucked all the cash out of their pensions. So the school teachers like my dad, the firefighters and police officers, they have no retirement now. And so that's why it's fake money, fake teachers, fake assets. They're the same system. And that's what Bucky Fuller encouraged me years and years ago. He says, you better tell the world what you know.